Ronan McDonnell, who's an independent consultant who's going to talk about supply chain management. He's done a lot of work with Intertrade Ireland and other agencies as well. Ronan.
Thanks, Richard. So yes, at the Logistics Consultants, we've been working with various agencies, including Intertrade Ireland and Enterprise Ireland, for the best part of 2 years. We've also worked in Northern Ireland with Invest NI. So, as well as advising companies at various roadshow events around the country, we've also done more than 50 mini projects assisting companies with supply chain and logistics operations and also customs procedures. So, as you've already heard, I suppose a lot of small Irish companies in particular don't have any track record of dealing with third countries beyond the EU, and many only ever trade with the UK. So it's not surprising that various studies have shown that customs and supply chain are the two big areas causing concern for Irish businesses in relation to Brexit. So, normally we'd spend a considerable amount of time with each company understanding the requirements, but today I suppose we're just able to give you a snapshot in terms of some of the issues. And today I'm primarily focusing on the inbound supply chain. So, any company in Ireland that's currently importing material or goods from the UK, including Northern Ireland, should assess whether those UK-based suppliers are prepared for international trade post-Brexit. So there's a few things that I suppose you should do in the first instance. Again, we've heard about yourselves obtaining EORI numbers, but you equally need to ensure that your UK suppliers have a UK EORI number, because again, for a lot of those companies, they may not trade beyond the EU currently. To assess as well if they're geared up to understand customs procedures, and to see if they got solutions in place to process export declarations, for instance. Whether they've got the capability in-house or whether they've already got customs agents or freight forwarders in place who can do this for them. And to see if their carriers as well, if their hauliers are prepared for customs procedures and to carry the necessary documentation required post-Brexit. And whether they have even considered potential for delays at frontiers that might impact on your business. So certainly I'd recommend that you engage with those suppliers and distributors in the UK. And that type of engagement as well can also be useful as a source of information. So Salim mentioned it's vital that you understand the country of origin of the goods. So, in talking and engaging with your UK-based suppliers, that's one way of finding that information. Similarly, as other speakers have said, one of the key things you're going to need to know are the commodity codes associated with the goods that you sell, but equally the goods that you import. And we've met a number of companies now who've gone forward and spoken to suppliers as a first port of call in terms of establishing what the commodity codes are associated with the goods. It's rather than you having to do all the legwork yourself, it can be a good way of obtaining that information. And you're going to need to know those commodity codes as well, even before Brexit kicks in, so you can assess what the likely tariffs are going to be on the goods that you're importing, and to see how significant those additional costs might be to your business. Aside from customs considerations, if you're moving agricultural or fishery products, you'll need to register with the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine and or the HSE. If you're importing live animals or animal products, you'll also need to register on the Traces system. And if you're importing fishery products, you'll also need to register with the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority. So certainly I'd advise you to speak to the Department of Agriculture. There's also a few other just practical pieces of advice in relation to importing. Make sure that the haulier considers access to agri-products when loading, because in the event that the goods need to be checked, ease of access is important. You'll also need to ensure that wood packaging materials, including pallets, meet the ISPM 15 standard. So a lot of companies aren't aware of this, but as it stands, importing goods into the EU, you should be using heat-treated pallets. And that will become an issue post-Brexit, because particularly we found both sides of the border here, that isn't the case currently, and you need to start planning for that now. And also ensure that your hauliers have got the required driver connectivity in place. We find that a lot of drivers are still using old Nokia phones, for instance. That just won't do post-Brexit, because in terms of catching ferries, they're going to need to have the information on the routing that comes through from customs. So it's vital that they'll have the proper connectivity in place. Celine mentioned as well that you also need to consider imports from beyond the UK that might actually transit the UK to get to Ireland. So it's important that you map your supply chain so that for each individual inbound route and outbound route as well, that you can establish from your logistics provider how those goods actually reach you or get to your customer. So where they transit the UK, it's not the end of the world, but because the UK has committed to becoming a common transit country post-Brexit, and that will allow the goods come from another EU country via the UK to Ireland and vice versa, without the payment of duty and reduced customs formalities. But nonetheless, there will be transit documentation required. So, as well as that, and this is something we can't really quantify at the moment, there is the potential for delays to occur at ports and frontiers. So, just by way of example, one food company, one food manufacturer we've worked with, importing frozen product from continental Europe, has already decided that they're going to bypass the UK completely. So there are now new direct roll-on, roll-off sailings from Rotterdam and Zeebrugge into Dublin. There's increased capacity from Cherbourg into Dublin, and there's a new route started last year from Cork into Santander in northern Spain. So all of those options are there. It might also be a question of looking at containerized traffic as well, direct to continental Europe. So that particular company I mentioned, though, because they're importing frozen food, the length of the lead time isn't such an issue for them, the temperature range isn't such an issue for them. So their main concern was maintaining continuity of supply. Those longer transport times won't suit everyone, so if you're importing flowers or certain, fresh food products, that may not be an option, but you should certainly consult your logistics partners to establish the best solution. So some other things you might consider in terms of mitigating risk. Companies we've worked with have looked at, for instance, sourcing from alternative suppliers in mainland EU, preparing to extend lead times in the event of delays. And it's also worth noting that your goods can be kept duty suspended or unpaid if they're to be re-exported in an approved customs warehouse or a temporary place of storage. So for example, one Enterprise Ireland company we worked with, they manufacture baby products and export those B2C into the UK market, but as well as exporting their own product, they're selling product that they import from the Far East. So they're looking at putting a customs warehouse in place because those products, if you like, are only coming into Ireland and back out again. So there are ways it's worth talking to revenue about. And similarly, if the imported goods are for specific processing, it may be possible to have the duty suspended or unpaid if those processed products are then re-exported. So we worked with a company down in Wexford who manufacture snack products. Their key customers are all based in GB, so they must use UK sourced beef. So they currently source the beef from Northern Ireland, they manufacture the products in the Republic, and then send the product to GB. So post Brexit, they're looking at using inward processing or outward processing as a solution. So they're going to establish a UK entity, and that UK entity will source the materials and will also own the relationship with the end customer. The Irish business will be the primary manufacturer, and the two will work together to make it work. So I suppose the main focus of my input this morning has been on the supplier-facing side, but we also deal with many issues on the customer-facing side. And one point that I'd like to reinforce that was made earlier, I think, by the Minister, is to put yourself in your customer's headspace, because they're probably thinking the same as you. And if things get too complex, UK-based companies may well start to look within the UK, so you need to try and make things as simple and as clear for them as possible.
So their own just constantly.
Sure. So as I said, just to recap, the key things are: 1, map your supply chain; 2, engage with your suppliers, hauliers, and customers; quantify the additional costs; identify potential solutions; and certainly seek out assistance, because there's plenty of assistance out there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ronan. And Intertrade Ireland has been mentioned a couple of times, and we're joined by Martina Keenan from Intertrade Ireland. Just a quick question to you, Martina. One of the things mentioned were the vouchers and the voucher scheme. What kinds of things are companies using those vouchers for?
I suppose I want to say, first of all, we have 2 types of vouchers. I've already mentioned the first voucher is our planet voucher, which is 100% funded up to €2,250. And the second one is 50% funded up to €5,625. And the vouchers can be used for one-to-one support, expert advice for the likes of Ronan, or to attend training courses. So it's practical advice. Most of the businesses coming through recently are looking at advice on customs, looking at the documentation and paperwork involved with that. The tariffs is, a lot of issues coming through on tariffs. Companies want one-to-one support on how that's going to impact their business. And obviously their supply chain, looking at end-to-end supply, looking at how that may impact their business, whether that be administrative costs, whether it be costs involved in the tariffs, delays in their goods. The application forms themselves are online. It's a 2-page online application. And to complement the vouchers, we have Brexit Beyond, which is an online learning tool where we have information, practical advice on customs and on the movement of people.
Great, thank you very much, Martina. An excellent resource. I'm sure people should check it out if they haven't done so already.